Fire is an extremely destructive force, and you can see its devastation in real everyday life. Join us today on the things that we fear as we dive into spontaneous human combustion. There are many theories surrounding the how and why of this phenomenon, but the truth is human combustion has never been completely explained. Spontaneous human combustion is where a human body, live or dead, randomly burns with no identifiable source of ignition. Victims of spontaneous human combustion tend to be overweight and known alcoholics and smokers. The fires tend to burn the victim without harming its surrounding, despite the intense heat being felt at every scene. In May 2013, fireman George Mott of Crown Point, New York, was found by his son. His body had been reduced to ashes and only one rib and his inexplicably shrunken skull were left behind. Everything else in the room had been left untouched. George was a known drinker and used an oxygen tank, but both the tank and the pack of matches found next to his body were completely unharmed. In 2010, 76-year-old Irishman Michael Flaherty was found burned to death in his home. Neighbors were awakened by the sound of his fire alarm and the sight of smoke coming from his house. He was found lying on his back close to the fireplace. The only damage that was found was the floor beneath his body and the ceiling directly above. However, nothing else in the room was harmed, and experts could not find any trace of accelerants. Investigators also concluded that the open fireplace was not the cause of Flaherty's death. In 1951, Mary Reeser's landlady stopped by to deliver a telegram and discovered her tenant's door was hot to the touch. With the help of some workers, she broke down the door and found Mary's ashes. The only intact parts of her were a piece of her backbone and her inexplicably shrunken skull. In 1957, 78-year-old young Sikh Kim, who was a paraplegic for most of his life, was seated in his wheelchair when his neighbor came to visit. The neighbor claimed that when he came inside, he saw Kim enveloped in a blue flame that seemed to originate from his abdomen. The neighbor called for help, but by the time they had arrived, Kim had completely burned to ash. Only his feet were left intact. His chair was singed but still intact, and some of the clothing found close to his body had burned. There are roughly 150 documented cases of spontaneous human combustion dating back to as early as the 1700s, yet it still remains unexplained to this day. One of the theories, however, is something that experts call the wick effect, which is the belief that as human body fat melts into clothing, the cloth acts like a wick and continues to burn, while the fat keeps the fire from spreading to outside objects, much like a candle. There are many scientists and investigators who agree with this theory, but there are also those who argue against it. They say that the human body requires temperatures up to 2600 degrees Fahrenheit to completely burn to ash, and even then it takes up to 2 hours. And even afterwards, bone fragments can still be found in the ash. Whatever the theories behind this phenomenon, I think I speak for all of us when I say it is still horrifying. Well, that's all we have for today's episode. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up, and if you have an idea for an episode you'd like to see in the future, comment it in the section below. And hey, while you're down there, let us know, what do you fear?